Coming up on this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society, we go ape for Donkey Kong Country's silver anniversary. It's dangerous to go alone, so the Nintendo Cartridge Society goes with you. Welcome to Nintendo Cartridge Society. My name is Patrick Ellers, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Mark Mitchell. Mark, how's it going?
It's going so good.
Uh-huh.
So happy to be here celebrating Donkey Kong Country's 25th anniversary with you, Patrick.
Does it seem crazy to you that that game came out 25 years ago?
Yeah, in some ways it totally does. And then in other ways, when I'm like thinking back on all the stuff that's happened
Sure.
between when I like played that game for the first time.
Sure, 9/11.
And now I'm like, yeah, a lot has happened. But of
Mhm.
course, to commemorate the occasion, Patrick is wearing a King Kong outfit. I am wearing a donkey outfit, and Sarah is dressed as somebody serving papers from Universal Studios to Nintendo saying that Universal is suing them.
Right. We've gotten a lot of questions about the group costume so far, which is remarkable because we have not left my apartment in these costumes. It's just my neighbor walking by and saying, "What are you guys doing in there?" And us pulling the curtains.
Exactly. It's a Thanksgiving tradition.
Or it will be from here on out.
Yes.
This is the first we are establishing it. Speaking of a tradition, you can borrow my copy of Sonic Forces for the Nintendo Switch. All you got to do is email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society
At gmail.com.
with a mailing address so we can send you my copy of Sonic Forces and you can play it for as long as you want.
I think at this point, Sonic Forces is becoming either a cult favorite
Uh-huh.
or we're looking back on it fondly, from simpler times.
From simpler times?
Or on it as
We're-
simpler times.
Sure, we are seeing a quaint reflection of the America of yesteryear.
Of the way we were.
Yes, back before we had to worry about them changing the Sonic design in the Sonic movie and then changing it back, and everyone being like, "Okay, yeah, I guess that is what we wanted."
All right. I mean, I've still not seen the movie, but
No.
it does look more like Sonic.
I mean, the second trailer is arguably worse than the first one because it's got more like dumb little jokes in it, right?
Right. Like, there's no way that it's going to be like, yes, Sonic was creepy and had way too many teeth, but
Uh-huh.
also nothing else about that trailer looked good either.
Yeah,
Why would you pair Sonic with an adult cop?
yes. And why is that adult cop James Marsden? Give the guy a break. He deserves so much more than a Sonic the
He deserves
Hedgehog
so
movie.
much better.
God.
Save James Marsden.
Yes. So you can email us at savejamesmarsden@gmail.com. I wonder who owns that email address. I'm going to send him an email tonight. Don't send them your address. Also, here's another thing that we're doing, and this is the last time we're going to ask you about it. We are determining the best piece of Nintendo music of all time, and we are only doing it with pieces of music that you nominate by emailing us at Nintendo Cartridge Society
At gmail.com.
or by tweeting at us at NinCard Society. We need these pieces of music.
And we need them by tomorrow.
Yeah, that is Friday, November 22nd.
That's the deadline.
That's it. Drop dead, I would say. Yes? It's a drop dead deadline.
It is. There's no getting around it.
That's right.
It's a dream drop distance.
It's a dream drop distance. It's a DDD. And if we don't get, 365 over 2 divided by sleep, I don't know how Kingdom Hearts titles work. Look, but just get those into us as soon as you can so that we can determine the best piece of music. We don't want to leave anything off the table, but if we do, it's your fault because we can't add anything to the lineup.
And we told you. We warned you.
That's right. Okay, Mark, are you ready to get into it? Let's determine the 5. Oh, this is what we're doing. This is how we're.
We should probably introduce
I don't think
this.
we've set it up. Oh, let's just move into the
Yeah.
thing and that'll be the second. Here we go.
Moving forward.
Happy 25th anniversary to Donkey Kong Country. We are using the opportunity to determine the 5 best Donkey Kong games. Now, Mark, you confessed something to me right before we started recording that some may find startling.
Yeah, you are putting me on blast.
I
Although
am.
it's going to come out eventually.
Of course it
when we
was.
start going through my list of 5, is that I haven't played that many Donkey Kong games, and of the ones I have played, like Donkey Kong 3, I refuse to include them in a list of the top 5, even if they're one of the only 5 that I've played.
Right. So it is possible that Mark has only played 5 Donkey Kong games, although I feel like I've played at least 5 Donkey Kong games with you.
Right. But none of it, yes. But not all of those are going to go on my list.
Right.
So we'll just see how this plays out.
Yeah. So there are a ton of games. There are a bunch of Donkey Kong games, right? And we are approaching this holistically, even though we are saying that we are doing this as part of Donkey Kong Country's 25th anniversary. Our entries need not be part of the Donkey Kong Country series
Completely.
or even use that like design of Donkey Kong. If we wanted to, our list could be Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Jr., Donkey Kong Jr. Math, Donkey Kong 3, and a 5th one. But I don't think it's gonna be. I don't think it's gonna be that.
I don't think it's gonna be that either.
Would you like to? Well, so we both came to this with our own list of 5, and I assume that we will have some overlap, but also maybe mostly not.
Right.
So
I think our lists are going to be your answer heavy. Although
Right.
maybe I'll make some compelling cases for some of the games that I have on my list. But the goal of this, and I'm saying this for my benefit as much as anybody's, is for us to combine our lists to come up with 5, like pare it down.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we should come up with an ultimate 5, and I also do believe that during this, beyond representing the 5 games that you came with and 5 games that I came with, that we should look at it holistically and try to, and maybe the list shouldn't be like restricted to the idea of like the 5 best so much as like here is a fun like cross section of what Donkey Kong brings to video games.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, as long as we're all on the same page that would be a definitive fun list of game, like a cross section of games.
Yes,
that Donkey Kong brings to video games.
I agree to these terms. Would you like to start with one of your top 5 picks?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with probably a very uncontroversial pick, which is Donkey Kong Country.
Yeah.
The original Donkey Kong Country.
On my list as well. So I feel like the original Donkey Kong Country is going to go on this list definitively, no matter what, right?
I think so too. I remember the first time that I saw it in action, and I feel like it was at like a friend's house or something like that. Like I can't remember exactly where it was.
Yeah.
But it really did blow my mind. And at this time, I wasn't really like tuned into the console wars or know what was going on. Like my cousin who lived in New York, he had a PlayStation, so I knew what like PlayStation was. Wait, was PlayStation even out at this point?
In 1994, I'm not sure. Keep talking. I'll
Well,
look it up.
Basically, it was like I was always a Nintendo kid, right? Like my parents, we would get Nintendo consoles, and I was happy with that. Like I had friends who had like Genesis and things like that, but I never wanted one. I was very happy playing Nintendo.
PlayStation, the original, came out the next year.
Oh, okay. So like I was aware that other things were out there, but there was none of this like whose graphics are better, type thing that I was really in. But I was all about bits, right?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
16 bits, 64 bits. The idea of it was blowing my mind. And Donkey Kong Country looked like nothing I had ever seen before.
Yeah, I mean, it's so funny just because, like, looking at it now, like, they look bad, right? Like, but we hadn't seen these kind of, like, pre-rendered images that had then been, like, severely digitized. But it seemed like magic. Like, I remember people saying that, Donkey Kong looked like a gorilla, which is insanity because, like, no way does a gorilla look like that.
It also had a very, like, 90s attitude.
Uh-huh.
where you
Well,
know.
Diddy did. I think
I think all the whole like thing did, right? Like
Sure.
Cranky was sassy,
Yeah.
and there was rapping and cool music.
Oh,
And
there sure was rapping. I think the one thing that does, or not rapping. I guess they hold that off until 64.
oh
like the
right,
actual
but you remember
rapping.
like at the beginning when you're in the titles,
Oh yeah,
and you know, like Cranky has the
he's
record
he's
player.
he's cranking. He's cranking the
And
Victrola.
then, like, somehow or another, he gets like bumped off,
Right.
and like a boombox shows up, and everybody's dancing.
Yeah, Donkey Kong's holding it. I do think one of the things that keeps the original Donkey Kong Country from being too like 90s in your face cool is that Donkey Kong himself doesn't really participate in it.
No,
Like,
he's corporate. He's wearing a tie.
he's wearing a tie, and also like he keeps like all of his mannerisms are just like straight gorilla, right? Whereas Diddy, he wears a hat. He's got a little bit more of like he's got that like cool 90s kid persona to him, and that's something that you see in Diddy's Conquest and in Donkey Kong Country 3, that like he and Dixie are both like kind of, they're like weirdly 80s kids in the 90s, you know what I mean? But there's a classicness.
Well, it was like developed by people who were,
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
like growing up in the 80s.
Yeah. But on Tuesday's episode, we were talking about how Mario is cool. And I think Donkey Kong has a little bit of that same sort of like swagger or confidence that isn't as like stupid as it is in Diddy or Dixie Kong, which is one of the reasons that for me that I put this as my representative from that series of games. I think it is better than Donkey Kong Country 2. I think it is better than Donkey Kong Country 3. Partially based on those characters.
I think also it began to introduce, right, like all of these characters that we now just like consider part of
Yeah.
the Donkey Kong series, right?
Yeah.
King K. Rool,
Mhm.
Diddy was introduced here, and eventually, you know, like Dixie, but Cranky was introduced here.
Yep.
Um,
Rambi.
you should go back to our rankings of all the Kongs
That's right.
and of the like animal helpers. But the other thing that I like, this game blew me away because I really liked platformers as a kid. It was probably like my favorite genre at the time, and you know, maybe actually still is. But other than like the Mario games, there weren't a ton of platformers that we owned growing up.
Yeah.
And in the SNES era. And so to have like another one and have one that was so good with so many secrets, like there were parts of it that just totally blew that I thought were like so cool and funny. Like there's one level where if you turn around and go back through the entrance, it takes you to the end of the level.
Right.
And like to have like all those secrets, and I think you found all of them, but there's more, you can more than 100% the game.
101%.
And
there was no precedent for that yet.
like minecart levels, like all that kind of stuff. I don't know. It was so formative for me. It's like a very magical game to me.
Yeah, and I mean it is also it's Grant Kirkhope, right, who did the music, or is this David Weiss?
I'm not sure. I think it might be David
It
Weiss.
might be David Weiss. But the music in this game is legendary. The aquatic ambience is a track that we are going to be talking about next week on our battle of the best Nintendo music ever. Like the music throughout this game is just phenomenal. And you know, in addition to music, there are just like a lot of interesting little like nature sounds. Like the soundscape for this game is amazing. I also think one of the things that Donkey Kong Country does very well is create a sense of space, and like the environment of that island is very compelling and very interesting and varied, like as you're going through it. You know, it does kind of like the normal thing of like, here's a little bit of a more deserty area. You start in like a jungle, and then, you know, like here's the snow level. But there's also like, all right, and this one's the industrial pollution plant, you know? But like, I don't know. I always think about the sort of atmospheric storytelling of the part of the snow level, the stretch of 4 levels back to back, where it's a grueling thing to get through, that you have to do all 4 of those levels, and then maybe one more even before you can get to a save point. Where the first one is Snow Barrel Blast, where like the blizzard like slowly sets in as you're moving throughout the level.
Which is something that I don't remember ever seeing before. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that really was like the first time something like that had been done, but it was the first time I experienced anything like that.
Yeah, and it's so awesome. Like the way it's measured out, like you start the level and it's not snowing at all. And then like every time you get to like a new section, which is usually like triggered by you launching out of a barrel, there's like more snow in the background, and then there's like heavy snow in the background. And then by the end of the level, there's like huge snow even in the foreground, and like you can't see anything, and it's chaos. And then you spend the next 2 levels inside caves. So you're like, okay, I guess you sort of like forget that it was snowing in the last level you played, and then you get to the next like outdoor level, and the snow has like started, or like it is still going, and by the time you get to the end of that level, it has all disappeared. Like it does such a good job of being like, oh yeah, a blizzard set in, so you took refuge in a cave, and then you like came out of it as the blizzard dissipated. Like it's so cool and feels like such a genuine like progression of time and space in this stupid game where your gorilla's trying to get bananas back, you know? I just love it. And we've ragged on Donkey Kong Country 2 a fair amount, so we don't need to like dwell on it too much. But one of the reasons that I wouldn't put Donkey Kong Country 2 on this list is I don't feel like the levels are varied enough. That you spend too much time in like the sort of like briar patch sort of aesthetic. Too much time in that, and too much time in like volcanoes. And I guess maybe also too much time in like weird bee areas,
right? With lots of honey.
Yeah, like those are the 3 images that I associate with that game, and I just feel like there are so many more different world types in the original. But so I think we agree Donkey Kong Country goes on this list for sure. You want me to go next?
Yeah, go for it.
So obviously Donkey Kong Country is one of mine. The next on my list comes out the same year as Donkey Kong Country. This is Donkey Kong 94 for the Game Boy Color. This is a game that starts off and appears very much to be a Game Boy Color version of the original Donkey Kong arcade game, but you blow past the original first 4 levels, and the whole thing like opens up, and it is clear that what you are playing is a like action puzzle platformer where you're controlling Mario, who now has all of the acrobatic moves that we will eventually like understand Mario to have in all games. Like this is where the Mario triple jump comes from. This is where Mario doing like the handstand and like jumping high. Like it's every move that Mario shows in Super Mario 64. He first shows off in Donkey Kong 94. And it's just a beautiful game. Still looks great on like, if provided that you're willing to embrace the limitations of a Game Boy Color. And it's got so many levels. It introduces the idea of New Donk City. That's like...
Wait, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
The city that Donkey Kong 94 takes place in is New Donk City. And so that's something that they picked up on in Super Mario Odyssey.
That's amazing.
And it's just a great game. I picked it up again recently on the 3DS and holds up. Super fun. Yeah, I mean, it is for me like the best way to experience the original style Donkey Kong gameplay. I love the original Donkey Kong. I love Donkey Kong Jr. I think those are phenomenal games. Donkey Kong 94 makes them both obsolete.
I've never played it. It's a game
so
I didn't even know
man.
existed until like 5 years ago or something, when I think I heard Jeremy Parrish talk about it on Retronauts.
Yeah.
It makes me want to play it so much. It's widely regarded, I feel like nowadays, as one of the best Game Boy games.
Yeah, totally. I mean, if they were ever going to do like a Game Boy Classic edition, the Donkey Kong 94 would absolutely have to be. It would have to be on that thing. Like as quintessential as like Tetris, and I recognize the name of the game is not Donkey Kong 94. It is just Donkey Kong. But I mean,
which I think is such an interesting choice, because there was another Donkey Kong game for Game Boy, also just called Donkey Kong, which was just the original Donkey Kong arcade.
Yeah. So, I mean, what are you going to do, though?
Yeah, I feel like for that reason, it kind of went under the radar on its release a little bit.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the Game Boy Color is such a weird, like, half step in, like, the life cycle of the Game Boy brand and, like, the portable brand. The Game Boy itself had already been kicking around for so long, like a decade, when they put out the Color as sort of like a stopgap until the Game Boy Advance came out, like, 2-3 years later. So, and, you know, I think the Game Boy Advance is looked on so fondly because a lot of, you know, really cool games came out for it, and a lot of people are introduced to Super Nintendo games through it. And, like, the original Game Boy is so closely associated with the games that came out for it, like, initially, and then later Pokemon, that, like, the Color just as a, like, genre of game is like a footnote or like a curiosity in Nintendo's history.
Yeah, which is weird because I think it was a full 5 years because if the Color released, if this game was in '94,
yeah,
then the Color had to have been out by
great
then,
point.
and I don't think that the Advance released until 2001.
Yeah, that is right. So I
think
guess
it literally
was 6
was
years,
like
yeah.
a stopgap. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, so 94, Donkey Kong 94. Yeah, crazy.
Okay, so I'm gonna jump to one of the maybe more tangential games on my list.
All right.
Before going back to what I think is for sure a Stone Cold classic. So I'm putting Super Smash Bros. Melee on here, and the reason I have it on here is because Donkey Kong was a fighter in the original N64 game, but honestly, I can't remember. Was there a Donkey Kong specific level in that version? I don't know, but I do know that Melee introduced Jungle Japes.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite Smash Brothers levels ever, and has left such an impression on me because one of the things
that's the one with the rushing water at the bottom of it, right?
So there's like two like huts that are sitting on top of rushing water, and then there's a couple of other platforms on the side of different sizes. But one of the things that I really like about this level is I feel like, you know, we've talked about in the past that part of my love of Donkey Kong Country is just like the mood and my memories of like the emotions of like playing that game.
Yeah.
And I think that Jungle Japes does such a good job of evoking the like perpetual twilight of Donkey Kong, and it really is like the aesthetic that I associate with those Donkey Kong Country games, especially the first one. Even though weirdly, I don't think it's like actually a direct mapping of anything from Donkey Kong Country.
It's just like taking the like design aesthetics and like the design of like the huts.
Yeah, and to me it like taps into like the like artistic emotion of what that series evokes at its best. So yeah, like it's something that I associate as like quintessentially Donkey Kong, even though I think it only exists in this one like kind of like random place.
And you know, Smash is so good at that, at like evoking the like quintessential nature of a game. I guess I will take issue with it being like one of the top 5 Donkey Kong games.
Hey, I told you going in that this is going to be
out.
Yes,
worth the shout out, I think.
Yeah, I think probably not on our list, but
yeah, I mean, I've already written it in there. It's not final, of course.
No, you've written it as not in the list.
Oh, that's right. Oh, yes, I wrote it on the not the list.
Yes,
right. So my next pick, perhaps not a surprise, people who've listened to the show before, is Diddy Kong Racing, which I'm counting as a Donkey Kong game, even though Donkey Kong appears not in the game. It is Diddy Kong as the star, and most of the time I'm not playing as Diddy Kong. I'm playing as like Conker or Banjo or that Badger guy. His name is like Bumper, maybe? I think his name is Bumper. But Diddy Kong Racing, to me, one of the things that maybe keeps me from putting it on like insisting that it goes on our definitive list is that I don't think there is a like perfect way to play this game now. It was a kart racer originally on the Nintendo 64, and then re-released on the DS. And on the DS, like some of the graphics are cleaned up, and just like overall the frame rate is better. and everything. But every single race starts with like a dumb little touch mini game to like get a boost depending on what kind of vehicle you're in. So one of the things that this game did two big things like to distinguish itself from Mario Kart, right? First is that there was like an overworld between the tracks, like a big open island that you can just like drive around as part of like a story mode to unlock new tracks and all this kind of stuff. So there's that, and then also 3 different kinds of vehicles. So you could either drive around in a cart, a little hovercraft, or in a little plane. And in the DS version, depending on which one of those 3 vehicles you were in, there was a different like little touch mini game. I feel like one of them you maybe had to like blow on the microphone to like try and get the boost. So like it's in every other way a superior version of the game. But in this one way is like almost irredeemably bad. You know, I would love for there to be either a new Diddy Kong Racing or just a remaster on current hardware. But the game was just so fun and like was one of those genuine competitors to Mario Kart, and really doesn't mess with the formula too much. Like, you know, there are other kart racers that, you know, kind of get put up in the same like echelon as Mario Kart, like the Crash Team Racing or Mod Nation Racers, and all of those like kind of stake out a little bit different space. But Diddy Kong Racing feels very much like Mario Kart.
When I was doing research for this episode, I found a game that was canceled and never released, but it was like a Diddy Kong Racing sequel that did feature Donkey Kong.
Yes.
And it was only planes were like the only vehicle in it.
Yeah,
it was
Pilot, right?
Yeah, I think it was originally a GameCube title, and then Nintendo's relationship with Rare obviously changed a lot in the GameCube era, and then a little bit of work was done for it on the Wii, but obviously was never released.
Also, didn't they like start to change it to Banjo Pilot as like a GBA game? I also did a little bit of research on this too.
Yeah.
But you know, also it never actually saw the light of day. It is weird to me that it is a brand that, I mean, it must not have been that successful, but like it's one of those games that I feel like is well regarded in our like collective memory. It's just weird that they've never gone back to it. Although I guess the counterpoint is Mario Kart is such a system seller that, like, you know, why muddy the waters there?
Yeah, I also think you just see that so much in like Nintendo's history, right? Like the list of IP or franchises that have just kind of been abandoned is pretty long. And I think some of it is just like the opportunity cost, right?
Yeah, totally.
Like Nintendo, for as successful as it is not that big of a company,
right?
And so they just don't have the development teams to work on all these different things. Then I think the other part of it is like you're saying, like Mario Kart is the kart racer that they've chosen to put their focus in.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, to be fair, and this is, you can see it in the DS remake, they had to take out a bunch of stuff that like Rare owned. You know, like the game is arguably more of a Rare game than it is a Nintendo game, because that's Banjo appears there first, Conker appears there first, and neither of those characters are in the re-release. And if they were to do like a remaster now, they would have to be missing again.
So my next pick is kind of in the same vein as Smash Brothers Melee, so maybe not going to make it on the list. But
cool.
I don't want to.
I'm gonna write it down.
Stomp on the hopes and dreams of this too late. But it's Mario Kart Double Dash.
2 kart racers,
and because it includes DK Mountain, which DK Mountain, like a cool level in general, but one of the things, it also introduced like barrel blasts into Mario Kart. I also think, but and this is a part where I actually can't remember off the top of my head, but he is Mario Kart, or excuse me, Donkey Kong is a featured racer in Double Dash and is also a featured racer in Mario Kart 64. I'm pretty sure he shows up in Super Mario Kart as well.
It's Super Mario Kart. It is Donkey Kong Jr.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is just
Still a Donkey Kong character, and a Donkey Kong character that, if you go back to our rankings of the Kong, is one that we don't really know what he is.
Yes, or where he came from.
He's like the missing generation.
timeline?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Because Cranky Kong is the original Donkey Kong, and the Donkey Kong in Donkey Kong Country is his son, grandson. And Donkey Kong Jr. is what? What is Donkey Kong Jr.?
Where does Donkey Kong Jr. fit in?
No one knows.
Nobody knows. But yeah, DK Mountain, I don't really have a ton to say about it other
Yeah.
than it is another one of those like things that even that it's just like kind of generic or general jungle theming.
Yeah.
I associate it very strongly in my mind with Donkey Kong.
I also think that like the like GameCube era of like Donkey Kong related stuff is cool because it's sort of like the last gasp before the Donkey Kong Country Returns aesthetic gets stapled onto Donkey Kong stuff. So like I like the DK levels in Mario Kart Wii and Mario Kart 8, but they have some of them do the like sort of like tiki masks from Donkey Kong Country Returns, which I don't find to be a super compelling like component of the Donkey Kong games. I don't know if Returns is on your list, and we'll find out if it's on mine. But there's enough in that game that I don't love that seeing it in like the future versions of Smash or Kart just doesn't feel as special.
Yeah, the GameCube era is a very interesting time for Donkey Kong.
Yes.
Because we didn't get a traditional Donkey Kong platformer
No.
during that era. We got some other like Donkey Kong games that again don't want to like tip our hands too much because I'm
Right.
not sure if it shows up on yours. I can't wait to.
Oh, I got a GameCube game on my list.
Okay, great, because I do as well. After a fashion, but
Interesting.
yeah.
All right, Mario Kart Double Dash. Again, I'll maybe take issue with. Is that one of the 5 best Donkey Kong games? I don't know. Good, fun thing to talk about, though. So should I just cut right to what we were just talking about?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Donkey Konga is on my list on the Nintendo GameCube, the rhythm game that is all Donkey Kong themed, and you just play a pair of bongos that have a little microphone in it so you can clap, and it has some pop tunes in it, and it's got some like weirdly arranged classical pieces of music, but there are also a handful of Nintendo pieces of music in there, including a sort of like samba'd up Legend of Zelda, and there's also a Mario medley and the original Pokemon theme song.
I think if you
are all in there.
if you go back to one of our earlier episodes, like way back probably in like the first year or so of the show, we did some music episodes, and I think the Legend of Zelda samba arrangement made it onto one of those episodes.
I mean, do yourself a favor right now and look up a video of the Legend of Zelda theme from Donkey Konga, and just enjoy it because it's amazing. The sort of like full Latin band percussion section, like drum sound in it, is just fire. It's awesome. And the game itself is just like, it's so responsive and like quick. It feels the most like actually like, this is a complaint that I have with Guitar Hero, is that it doesn't actually feel like playing the guitar. And sometimes people who know how to play guitar have a hard time playing Guitar Hero because it's such a weird like half step to doing the thing. Playing the bongos of Donkey Konga feels very much like playing bongos, and like the fact that it really only has 2 inputs and then a microphone. It seems like so simple, but the things that it makes you do and the way it makes you respond really quick to like different rhythm patterns is just super fun and super great, and I love it.
Yeah, I feel like we almost need to talk a little bit about how weird this game is that it even exists, because it came out towards the end. It also had a sequel, by the way.
Oh yeah,
but it
and
came,
a third one in Japan.
It came out towards the end of the GameCube's life,
Yes.
And, like most consoles have, towards the end, kind of like the doldrums. But it was particularly acute with the GameCube because, Nintendo and third parties had a rocky relationship, but the GameCube is really when things like start to come apart.
Yeah.
And, for whatever reason, like Nintendo wasn't developing a ton, probably because they were focused on like the Wii at that point. There wasn't a lot for people who owned the system to look forward to. And Donkey Konga was such a weird thing that you had to buy these like big bongo peripherals to play. And it had weird, like licensed music and covers. Like it's such like it is so strange. It is
if you
want
to listen to,
game.
you have to want to listen to a cover band play Blink 182's "All the Small Things," right? While you pound on some plastic instruments. But so yeah, I mean, like it is by no means like perfect, because like you say, it has all these like weird licensed tracks that they weren't getting like the originals. Like, it was way before Guitar Hero had set that standard. So like, it was just different, and the game supported. Because it's on the GameCube, it supported 4-player simultaneous. And my buddy Paul and I in college were like, I had gotten the second set of bongos so we could play together. And then he was like, yo, do you want to go get 2 more? And I was like, yeah, man, let's do it. And like we did it. There were 4 of these 4 sets of these bongos in my dorm room in college.
Do you remember how much they cost? Were they like 40
bucks? I think they were $30.
$30.
Yeah. And I think one of them just came with the game. Mm-hmm. But yeah, no, it was too much money, and I think Paul bought one of them. But we would do where he would have 2 and I would have 2, and just play the game. I don't know. It was I would love to see this franchise return, and I would totally buy like. And if they sold like a nice pair of like real bongos, like actually wood, and like, oh man, I would love it. I would commit myself to Donkey Konga.
The super like deluxe edition where it's like a really nice bongo that you can pop off the top. A nice bongo.
It's like
where
nice
you can pop
bongo
off the top. And inside is the game.
Yes, perfect.
Okay, well, I'm glad we brought up the bongos. Because a game I have on my list is a game I've actually never played. It's about Donkey Kong Jungle Beat.
Yeah.
Which is a platformer. I think you could also just use a normal GameCube controller. And later on the Wii, they released it with like, I don't know if it had motion controls or if it was just button inputs.
No, it was motion controls.
But in like the, whatever they called it, like the Wii like play controls.
Yeah.
When they would take games from the previous generation. Yeah, like something like that. But anyways, this was a Donkey Kong platformer, not in like the Donkey Kong Country style, but Donkey Kong platformer that you would play with the bongos. That was like the way that they advertised. Like that was the way it was meant to be played. It was another use for the bongos that you bought for Donkey Konga. But the reason that this game that I've never played is on my list is because it was developed by EAD Tokyo.
Yes,
which was Nintendo of Japan is based in Kyoto, but they set up this satellite development team in Tokyo where, you could get a completely different kind of developer who, was living in Tokyo or around Tokyo and didn't want to commute live, hundreds of miles away in Kyoto. And EAD Tokyo is the development team that took over Mario, I think based on like the strength of the work they did in Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, and they took over Mario and they created the Mario Galaxy series. And I think even though like the teams have all been rearranged and it's been a long time, so I'm sure it has different people in it, I think they are still at this point like the keepers of Mario. I think they're the team that are working on like Odyssey and those types of games. And Super Mario Galaxy is one of the best Mario platformers of all time. Like really kind of like transformed what the Mario series could be, I think.
Totally.
After the I like Sunshine, but I think it's hard to argue it's not a disappointment. And so for that reason, I love Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, even though I never played it, because it gave us what the Mario series has become.
So, I mean, if nothing else, it is like genuinely trying something new with something old, and not just like with Donkey Kong, but like with what is a Donkey Kong platformer, and like you would get into situations in that game where you were like where Donkey Kong was brawling, and so like you would hit the bongos to make him punch. Like I don't know what's not compelling about that. And the game itself isn't great, but like it definitely like shows that spirit of like invention and experimentation. So I'll write it down, Mark.
Tentatively, we'll see where we net out with the 5.
So I'm on my final one now because I agreed with you on Donkey Kong Country. My last entry is Mario versus Donkey Kong 2 March of the Minis on the Nintendo DS. So this is... There have been a lot of minis games, a lot of Mario versus Donkey Kong minis games, which are very like Lemmings-esque. You are shown like a map, and it's all like touch-based controls, and you don't have like direct control over any of the little like wind-up Mario toys on there, but you have to guide them through a level with various hazards and stuff to get them to like the entry or to the exit in either a certain amount of time or without like letting any of them die or anything like that. And there are a lot of these games, right? Most recently, I believe, is the Tipping Stars, which was a version of it that was free on 3DS. That you could also use like Amiibo to like tag in like other little like wind up toys, and that had a lot of like user generated content, and you would like earn stars by making levels and then tip people stars when you were playing their levels by saying, oh, it's a good level, here, have 3 stars or whatever. But all of that is like too reliant on... Actually, maybe I might be confusing Tipping Stars with just like the Amiibo version of it. It seems like they've done too many like weird variations on it. I want to get back to the original March of the Minis, which is Mario versus Donkey Kong 2. Yeah, that's it. It's a Lemmings-esque game, but still is close enough to like the origins of like the like Donkey Kong 94, where like your little Mario on like a big puzzle platforming screen is sort of like the basis of it. You just don't have direct control over the character.
Yeah, it's a franchise I'm not familiar with, or like a series I'm not familiar with, but I do feel like for a while they were releasing like a lot of variations on it.
Yeah, totally.
But I think it's another one that either like they've just kind of lost interest in, or that team is working on something else.
Yeah, so there. Hold on, I'm pulling up the Wikipedia article here. There was the original Mario versus Donkey Kong, which is a little bit more like direct control. It's less like Lemmingsy. Then there's March of the Minis, Minis March Again, Mini Land Mayhem, Minis on the Move, Tipping Stars, and Amiibo Challenge. So I was right; those are separate games.
Yeah, that's a lot of variations of like. That's a lot of entries in this series.
Yeah, and if like they could put out another one of these and just like update it, like they don't need to. It doesn't need to be a new game every time you do it. Just put out more levels. I think people would be into that.
Sidebar.
Yes,
I looked it up. It's called New Play Control.
New Play Control.
And thinking about it now, I had never made this connection before, but it's very similar to the playbook we've seen Nintendo do, where they've taken Wii U games and put them on Switch, because it's like, well, we put a lot of time into these Wii U games and they're really good, but not very many people played them. So let's put them on where they will have on a platform where they'll have a bigger audience. Nintendo did a very similar thing with New Play Control, where they were like, we made a lot of GameCube games and some of them are really good and nobody was able to play them.
Right.
So let's like repackage them
yeah.
for Wii with some motion controls.
And everyone and your grandma has the Wii, so like everyone can play it.
Right.
I wonder how those sold, like how the New Play Controls
they must have done okay, right? For them to like do a handful of them.
I mean, they certainly did do a couple of them.
So here is my final pick. And it's really bringing things full circle. I don't think it's a surprise for anybody who's listened to me talk about this game on the show before. It is Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, which I think is probably the best, in my mind, Donkey Kong game that I've ever played. It's, it's kind of the perfect platformer.
Yeah, and is just such a, I was talking about the how varied the original Donkey Kong Country is. This game blows it away, right? Like the levels are every single level that you go into tells its own story.
Once you get out of like the first like island, which is kind of generic, islandy and is not very special, but you get to that second one and everything's like really autumny. The music really kicks in. And then you get to like that one that's like Lion King on Broadway. Like,
oh man, Lion King on Broadway.
So amazing and varied. The music does something that is so unique to this game. It makes it like a theme park ride in which like different sections have different like pieces of music that queue up depending on where you are. And I guess like other games do it, but just the nature of these like 2D platformers and some of like the rocket barrel levels, like all that kind of stuff, makes it such like a unique and beautiful package that's challenging, but
if you got that funky mode, baby.
Oh yeah, the Switch version is the only one that I played all the way through, and it's totally the way to do it.
Yeah. Also, just on that note, we have gotten to the point now where Donkey Kong Country Returns is not on our list here. But if you are going to play it, dear God, play it on the 3DS because it does away with the motion controls. That's it.
I also think that game is too hard.
It is, yeah.
And like Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze is difficult, but with the changes that they made for the Switch version, it's much more manageable. Whereas I don't think any version of Returns ever really like found that sweet spot.
Yeah, I mean the economy of Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze is also such that like you can just buy extra lives using the coins, which are so plentiful, and you don't really have the same options to like kind of brute force your way through Returns in the same way that you would with Tropical Freeze, which is fine. There's no shame in that.
No.
Yeah, I didn't pick up the Wii U version or the Switch version of Tropical Freeze, but I really liked it on the Wii U, and that's like one of the Wii U games that I will like pull out the system for and mess around with that big dumb gamepad. Okay, so that means that we have the following games on our list. Are you ready, Mark?
Yes.
Donkey Kong Country, Donkey Kong 94, Super Smash Bros. Melee, Diddy Kong Racing, Mario Kart Double Dash, Donkey Konga, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2, March of the Minis, and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze. That is 9. We've got to cut 4 from this list.
So I will tell you my 5, or maybe 4. I think Donkey Kong Country and Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze are easy picks.
I think that is right.
Donkey Kong 94 definitely deserves to be on this list. And so I guess 3. I can think of 3 offhand that I feel like strongly about.
Yeah, and I'll agree that those 3 are kind of a lock.
Because we can briefly talk about like the arcade games that we're leaving off of this list.
Yeah.
Like I think Donkey Kong 3, if you were a listener of the show when we were doing our Donkey Kong 3 high score tournament, you know that game is terrible.
It's a bad game, yeah, and has an absurd difficulty spike where the game just becomes impossible. And then Lizzie clowns us all out with her score. And it's like we can't even compete.
And then the original Donkey Kong, I think we're replacing on this list with Donkey Kong 94.
Yeah.
And then Donkey Kong Jr. Is fine.
I like Donkey Kong Jr., but like I don't in any way think it like has to be on this list. I think we should choose either Donkey Konga or Donkey Kong Jungle Beat to go on here because the bongos are so neat and so weird. And like, I understand this makes it more of like a museum list because it's like, how can you even play this game now? Either of these games now. But I think they're an important part of what they tried to make Donkey Kong, or like what Donkey Kong could have been.
And if nothing else, it's definitely a snapshot of an era in Donkey Kong history and Nintendo history. So my vote is Konga, because I think it is the most pure version of that versus Jungle Beat, which, while I am so grateful for it for giving us Odyssey, well, I guess eventually, but Galaxy, I've never played it,
right,
and maybe not that great of a game.
Man, if they ever did put out Donkey Konga again and made people buy bongo drums again,
well, when the GameCube Classic Edition comes out,
well, totally right. It'll come with 4 of them. That Jungle Beat better be like unlockable on there. So that leaves us with one more position, and here are the games that we have not already put in like the lock: Super Smash Bros. Melee, Diddy Kong Racing, Mario Kart Double Dash, Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, and Mario vs. Donkey Kong 2: March of the Minis. Should we at this point out that we have not talked yet about Donkey Kong 64?
I think my lack of love for that game is well documented on this series.
Series Nintendo Cartridge Society.
Yes. So I don't think that it necessarily comes as a surprise that it didn't make my list.
Right. And didn't make my list because I also don't really love it.
I think for me, I can 100% say that Donkey Kong 64 suffered from expectations. Right, this was another game that I didn't like. I was not really like tuned into new video games at that time. I just got whatever was available to me.
Yeah.
And so Donkey Kong 64, on the one hand, was super exciting to me to get, but I at the time wanted it to be another Donkey Kong Country type game. And when it wasn't that at all, when it was something very different, I was just like, it was really hard for me to wrap my head around it. And so I've never really like bothered to give it a chance.
I mean, the thing that is like truly tragic about Donkey Kong 64 is that it is a good game with too much baggage. Like it's a good old fashioned rare collectathon style game, which isn't inherently bad, but it tips over into bad really easily.
Do you know if this was before or after Banjo-Kazooie?
It was after.
Interesting. Because I feel like it has a worse reputation, right? Like, because Banjo-Kazooie is a collectathon, but it feels more.
It's less
purposeful.
Like, yeah, there are fewer things to collect in Banjo-Kazooie, and fewer like types of things to collect. Like, one of the big problems with the game is that you play as 5 different Kongs, and they each have different color bananas that only they can collect. They each have different coins that only different color coins that the specific monkey needs to collect. They have different guns. They have different musical instruments. So like, you are literally going into a Super Mario 64 style world and doing small but open world like exploration activities, and you do it once, and once is still finding multiple points in the map, and then doing the exact same thing again with a different monkey. It's exhausting.
Yeah, it feels like they were very excited, and they were like, "Oh, we're gonna make the best of all this stuff. Like, we'll take the stuff people loved about Banjo-Kazooie. We'll take people love like the different Kongs, so we'll come up with more Kongs." Right, and it was less than like the sum of its parts.
Yeah, totally. Also, it should be noted that there's another like genre of Donkey Kong game that we're not talking about here. We're not talking about the and the Donkey Kong games that are all based on like the Clue Land style of Donkey Kong gameplay.
Right, that was like a Game Boy Advance game, right?
So there were two of them. There was Donkey Kong King of Swing on the GBA and Donkey Kong Jungle Climber, which is a little bit that was a DES game, I believe.
But I think King of Swing, the Game Boy Advance one, was another platformer that you would control just by hitting like the bumpers on the GBA, and
Right.
Donkey Kong would be kind of like have momentum, and depending on which bumper you were hitting, he would swing that direction and then also like grab
Right.
and like hold as you're like making your way up.
But he sort of had like infinite momentum. Like if you were just holding on to one little handhold, he would
It'd
just
just
rotate
spin.
around it
Yeah.
forever. Yeah, and that's I don't think either of those games really warrant us considering them for this list, but I feel good now bringing them up.
So thinking about this as like not just a list of the best, but like a museum or like a historical snapshot of like what Donkey Kong games are and have been. I think and this is probably not a surprise, but like either March of the Minis
Uh-huh.
or Diddy Kong Racing.
Yeah, so I love March of the Minis, but I almost feel like Donkey Kong 94 accomplishes the same thing by having it on this list. It's a different style of gameplay, but I would say that the original Donkey Kong Country and Tropical Freeze also like fill the same role. But there's no way I'm making this list without those two. So
The only counter I would say to that, and I think you're right, I think Diddy Kong Racing, even though it doesn't feature Donkey Kong, is probably the right choice. But I think Diddy Kong Racing still lives on in people's minds and hearts because it is such like a well-regarded game. Whereas I think the
the minis games,
that whole series, right?
Yeah.
Has just kind of like
7 games.
disappeared
Yeah.
and like fallen out of people's minds.
Which again, I will say is a shame. I think the series is better than the one they ran into the ground. They were trying weird stuff. The one like totally user generated, and another one that was free that you could just use your amiibos to unlock. Like that's interesting. They were trying things with it, but maybe for the same reason that Jungle Beat deserves a mention, but not actually a place on the list. That is the case for the minis as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
All right, so that means that our top 5 Donkey Kong games, in no particular order, and Mark, I don't want to order them. I think this is exactly what we need, top 5.
Same.
Donkey Kong Country, Donkey Kong 94, Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze, Donkey Konga, and Diddy Kong Racing. We did it. Now, I feel like we did a pretty comprehensive job here, but if people want to email us and tell us why we're wrong to leave Donkey Kong Country 2 off this
Or
list.
I would love to know if there are Donkey Kong games that we missed.
Sure. I mean, we didn't talk about any of the Donkey Kong Land games. But yeah, I mean, beyond that, we did a pretty good job, I think. You can email us at Nintendo Cartridge Society at gmail.com or tweet at us at NinCart Society and let us know your top 5 or just where we're wrong or whatever, or whatever. It sounds like I'm really taking it seriously, right? Like I'm good. It's measured criticism. I'm definitely gonna read. That's going to do it for this episode of Nintendo Cartridge Society. Remember, please rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. If you like the episode, please share it.
And do not forget that tomorrow is the last day to send us your picks for best Nintendo music ever. Don't live to regret Saturday.
Yep. Do not look. If it has become Saturday and you have not sent us the music, it's too late.
Right. We're recording this weekend, so
Right.
that's why we're asking for it on Friday.
That's right. It'll be a real you snooze, you lose situation. Get those suggestions in. Remember to follow us on Twitter. I'm at Patrick_Ellers. Mark is at MK Mitchell, and the show is at NinCart Society. It's also a Facebook page, which is just Nintendo Cartridge Society. Olivia Duncan made our logo. Our theme music is provided by 8-Bit Betty. You can get more of his music by going to 8bitbetty.com or by listening right now. For my co-host, Mark Mitchell, this is Patrick Ellers offering to go splitsies on that 4th bongo drums. And saying thanks for listening.
Hi, folks. Sean Watkins here. I'm here to tell you about my podcast/album called This Is Who We Are. That's right. It's a podcast and a record, all rolled into one. Each episode features one song off the record paired up with a conversation with a guest who is related to that song in some way. Guests include Jackson Browne, Inara George, Kate Micucci, and the conversations aren't about these songs specifically. The songs just serve as sort of a topical springboard that hopefully will lend a little context to this new album of mine. Sort of like a modern-day version of liner notes, only much more personal. The podcast and the album are both called This Is Who We Are. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts.